We live in a world that glorifies not caring. We're told to be chill, to stay unbothered, to play it cool like it's some badge of honor. But here's the truth. The more we pretend something doesn't matter, the more we risk losing what actually does. And by the time regret shows up, it's not loud, it's quiet. It shows up when you're alone, when the moment's passed, and when there's no more chance to go back and show you did care. So today, let's talk about what it really costs to act unbothered, because often that's when regret hits the hardest. We've all been in that place where we feel something deeply but choose to act like we don't. Maybe it's after a breakup, or when someone disappoints us, or even when an opportunity we wanted doesn't go our way. We put on the mask. We smile, we nod, we scroll. We say things like, "It's whatever," or "I'm good," when deep down we know we're not. But we convince ourselves that pretending not to care is the high ground, that it's maturity, that it's confidence. In reality, it's often just a defense mechanism. Acting unbothered isn't a show of strength. It's usually a sign of fear, fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. Because the truth is, to care about something, especially openly, is to risk. It's to admit that someone or something has power over how you feel. And that can be terrifying, so we go the other way. We shut down. We act indifferent. We tell ourselves that if we pretend not to care, we can't get hurt. But here's the problem: when we shut down our emotions to avoid pain, we also shut down the possibility of real connection, real growth, and real clarity. The more we pretend, the more we disconnect from what's actually going on inside of us. We tell ourselves we're fine so often that eventually we don't even know how we truly feel. It becomes a habit, and that habit keeps us from learning the lessons that only come from emotional honesty. Think about it. How many times have you walked away from a situation thinking, "I showed them I didn't care," only to lie awake at night wondering if you should have said something more? Should you have been braver? Should you have admitted that it hurt, that you still cared, that you weren't as fine as you made it look? It's in those quiet, lonely moments that regret creeps in. Not because you cared too much, but because you didn't show that you cared at all. And now it's too late. The irony is, the people who are truly strong are the ones who lean into their emotions, not run from them. They're the ones who say, "Yeah, this hurt," or "I wanted that to work," or "I miss you," not because they're weak, but because they're courageous enough to be real. And when you're real, you give others permission to be real too. You create space for truth, for healing, and sometimes for reconciliation. But when we stay in that place of emotional detachment, when we play the role of the person who's above it all, we end up creating distance, not just from other people, but from ourselves. We rob ourselves of the opportunity to grow through what we feel. We avoid discomfort in the short term, but pay for it in the long run, with confusion, missed chances, and the haunting feeling of what if. So while it might feel safe in the moment to act unbothered, the price is often much higher than we realize. Because the strongest thing you can do isn't pretending not to care, it's choosing to show up fully, even when it's messy, even when it might not be received the way you want, even when it makes you vulnerable. That's where the real power is, not in indifference, but in honesty. There's this moment we all face when something matters to us, but we hesitate to show it. It might be a relationship, a job opportunity, an idea, or even just a conversation we're too nervous to initiate. Instead of leaning in, we pull back. Instead of expressing what we feel, we downplay it. We say things like, "It's not a big deal," or "I'm not too invested." We act casual, uninterested, nonchalant, thinking we're protecting ourselves, thinking we're being smart. But what we're really doing is cutting ourselves off from the very thing we want. When you downplay emotion, you don't just avoid the potential pain, you also block the potential reward. People won't see how much something means to you if you make it look like it doesn't. And if they don't see it, they won't take it seriously. We assume that holding back makes us look more in control, more desirable, more powerful. But most of the time, it just makes us look disconnected, hard to read, difficult to trust. And when people can't read us, they stop trying to engage. That's when connection gets lost. Emotion is a signal. It tells us and others what matters. When you allow yourself to show genuine interest, you create a spark, you invite reciprocity, you open the door for alignment. But when you suppress that emotion in the name of seeming unbothered, you risk being misunderstood or worse, overlooked. The opportunity doesn't wait around trying to guess how you feel. It moves on to someone who is clear. Think about it. Have you ever interviewed for a job you secretly really wanted, but told yourself to play it cool? Maybe you didn't show too much enthusiasm, thinking it would come across as desperate. Maybe you held back from asking questions or expressing excitement, and then you found out they gave the role to someone who showed up fully, who wasn't afraid to say, "I would love to be here." That person wasn't desperate. They were just engaged. They gave that moment the respect it deserved. Or maybe it's a person you liked. You were afraid of being too forward, so you acted like you didn't care if you heard from them. You matched their energy instead of showing your own. but matching energy is only useful if it's leading somewhere. Sometimes people don't move forward with us because they think we're not interested. And why wouldn't they think that? That's what we showed them. We forget that caring doesn't equal weakness. It's not needy to be invested. It's human. Being emotionally available, showing you care about something or someone isn't a flaw. It's a strength. And it's incredibly rare, because most people are so used to protecting their ego, they don't even notice how much they've shut themselves off from life. The saddest part is that many of us only realize what we missed after the moment is gone. We look back and think, why didn't I just go for it? Why didn't I speak up? Why did I pretend I didn't care? And it's not because we didn't care. It's because we were too afraid to show that we did. So every time you find yourself about to hold back, ask yourself, am I protecting myself or am I preventing myself? Because those are two very different things, and often we call it self-protection when it's really just self-sabotage. The truth is, caring deeply, showing up fully, and being emotionally honest doesn't make you vulnerable to loss. It makes you available for something real. There's this belief many of us carry that silence is strength. That if we say nothing, do nothing, react to nothing, we're winning. We think withholding emotion, holding our tongue, or walking away without a word somehow gives us the upper hand. It's the ultimate power move, right? Stay silent, stay cold, stay above it all. But what we don't realize is that silence doesn't always mean we've moved on. In fact, more often than not, it just means we've avoided the work, the reflection, the uncomfortable truth. And what we've avoided doesn't just disappear, it waits. We tell ourselves we're over something because we don't talk about it anymore. We think because we haven't reached out, because we haven't cried in a while, because we've filled the silence with distractions, that we've healed. But real healing doesn't happen just because time passes. It happens when we face the feelings head on. And sometimes silence isn't healing, it's denial in disguise. It's a temporary pause on the pain, not its resolution. There are people we've walked away from and told ourselves we were done. We said nothing. We wished them well, silently, and convinced ourselves that if we never looked back, we'd be free. But then a moment comes, a random memory, a song, a message we didn't expect, and suddenly it hits us. All the feelings we buried, all the words we didn't say, all the clarity we never got. That moment doesn't just sting, it haunts us. Because when we don't give ourselves closure, regret fills the space. You can only suppress what you feel for so long before it finds a way back to you. Sometimes it shows up as anxiety. Sometimes it's bitterness. Sometimes it's just this quiet sadness that lingers in the background of your life. It's the what if that won't go away. The late night thoughts. The scenarios you keep replaying, wishing you had handled things differently. That's what silence often leaves behind, unfinished stories. And the worst part is, we often choose silence out of pride. We don't want to be the first one to break. We don't want to admit we care more than they do. We are afraid of looking weak, of being misunderstood, of saying something that won't be received the way we hope. But what we forget is that silence communicates too. It tells the other person something even if it's the wrong thing. And by the time we realize the impact of what we didn't say, the moment to say it has usually passed. Sometimes the hardest truth to swallow is that we weren't over it. We were just quiet about it. And by staying quiet, we didn't spare ourselves pain. We just delayed it. We postponed the emotional reckoning, and when it finally catches up to us, it often feels worse. Not because the moment itself was so terrible, but because we wasted the chance to be real, to find clarity, to get peace. We chose silence thinking it would protect us, and all it did was build a wall between us and the closure we needed. The truth is, growth comes from facing the mess, saying the hard thing, asking the question, admitting the feeling, even when it's uncomfortable, even when there's no guarantee it will go the way we want. Because at least then we know we showed up, we know we honored what we felt, and no matter what happens next, we can walk away without wondering what could have been if we had just spoken up. That kind of peace doesn't come from silence, it comes from honesty, and if we don't give ourselves that, regret will do the talking for us later. It's easy to assume that people will remember us by what we did or what we said. We put effort into choosing the right words, making the right impression, trying to leave a mark with actions and expressions. But so often, what actually lingers with people isn't what we said, it's what we didn't. It's the words we held back, the emotions we never showed, the moments we left blank. That silence becomes its own message. And in many cases, it speaks louder than anything we could have said. When something ends, whether it's a relationship, a friendship, a chance we let slip, it's not always the loud arguments or the dramatic exits that haunt us. It's the absence, the unspoken apology, the vulnerability we buried. The words like, I miss you, I was wrong, or I cared more than I let on. Those are the ones that echo, not because we needed to say them to change the outcome, but because not saying them left something unfinished. There's a kind of pain that comes from feeling like someone never really opened up to you, You can have months, even years of memories with a person and still walk away feeling like you never really knew how they felt. Why? Because they never said it. They never let you in. And in the same way, we sometimes do that to others. We leave them guessing. We think we're being strong, mysterious, or emotionally self-contained. But what we're really doing is creating emotional distance. We give the impression that we were unaffected, that nothing really touched us, and that's what they remember, not our presence but our absence. We often underestimate how much weight silence carries. Saying nothing can look like indifference. And when someone believes you were indifferent, they stop trying. They close off. They create their own version of the story without you in it, because you never gave them anything else to hold on to. The worst part, sometimes they would have stayed, sometimes they would have understood, but they didn't know because you didn't tell them. This isn't about over-explaining or emotional dumping. It's about recognizing that honesty, when shared with intention and clarity, can change everything. You don't have to say everything you feel, but saying nothing at all is rarely the answer. It leaves room for confusion, misinterpretation, and often pain on both sides. You may think you're being noble or mature by keeping quiet, but if the other person walks away confused or hurt because they never got to hear the truth, that silence can turn into a burden for them and for you. We look back at situations, sometimes years later, and realize that a simple sentence could have made all the difference. A conversation we avoided, a truth we swallowed, a gesture we didn't make because we were afraid of how it would be received. But time passes and the silence grows heavier, not lighter. We carry it with us, and it shows up as regret, wondering whether we could have brought more closure, more connection, or more understanding if only we had spoken. It takes courage to be real, to say what you mean, to expose a part of yourself that might not be met with validation or approval. But in the long run, it's always more freeing than holding back. Because when you say what needed to be said, even if the outcome doesn't change. You become someone who chooses presence over absence, truth over ambiguity, clarity over confusion. And that's something people remember, not just what you said, but the way you made them feel seen and understood, because you were brave enough to show them what was real. When you make a habit of acting like you don't care, you start attracting people who believe you. They take your detachment at face value. They assume you're not emotionally invested, and they match your energy, surface level, casual, indifferent, and suddenly you're surrounded by people who don't offer depth, because you never showed them you wanted it. You created a dynamic where no one's showing up fully, because no one feels safe to do so. And that's not chemistry, it's a performance. Acting unbothered might feel like a way to protect your heart, but it often ends up building a wall between you and the kind of connection you actually crave. You want depth, you want someone who understands you, who's all in, who meets you with real emotion, but you're putting out a version of yourself that suggests you don't want any of that. And the people who are emotionally available, they're not going to keep trying to get through to someone who seems unreachable. They won't chase clarity, they'll walk away, assuming you're not interested or not capable of going deeper. At the same time, there are people out there who are drawn to emotional distance, not because they're healthy, but because they want control. To them, your indifference is an opening. They see your cool, guarded energy as a challenge. It becomes a game. And they play along not to build something meaningful, but to win. And when someone's trying to win you, not understand you, that's when things start to feel off. The connection lacks stability. There's no real communication, just strategies. Just two people trying not to lose first. This is how you end up in cycles with people who are emotionally unavailable themselves. You attract what you present. If you show up as someone who's guarded and distant, you're going to attract people who either love the chase or prefer relationships where no one has to get too close. And then you wonder why you never feel truly seen. Why the relationships don't last. Why you always feel like something's missing, even when everything on the surface looks fine. It's not just about romantic relationships either. This pattern can show up in friendships, family dynamics, even work environments. If you're always trying to appear unaffected, like nothing touches you, people will stop coming to you with things that matter. They'll assume you're not the person to open up to. They'll admire your composure, but they won't feel connected to you. Because connection doesn't grow in the presence of masks, it grows in the presence of real human messy emotion. We think vulnerability is dangerous, but what's actually dangerous is going through life hiding the parts of us that are most capable of love, joy, and connection. We assume that if we open up, we'll get hurt. But the truth is, if we don't open up, we guarantee loneliness. Not just the kind where you're physically alone, but the kind where you're with people who never really know you. That kind of loneliness can follow you everywhere. So the next time you feel the urge to act indifferent or hold back just to seem in control, ask yourself, what kind of connection do I want to build? Do I want to be chased for looking unattainable or chosen for being authentic? Because the people who are right for you, the ones who can meet you at your depth, won't be scared off by your emotions. They'll be drawn to them, but only if you're willing to show them. There's a common misconception that the person who cares less holds the most power, that the one who appears the most unaffected is the strongest. So we try to master that image. We play it cool, hold back our enthusiasm, act like nothing touches us too deeply. We equate detachment with confidence, but that isn't real strength. It's fear wearing a mask. It's control disguised as maturity, and it ends up costing us more than we think. The real flex isn't acting like nothing affects you. It's being fully in the moment, showing up with your heart open, and letting someone or something matter to you. It's having the courage to care even when there's a risk it might not be reciprocated. That's bravery. That's presence. That's what makes you powerful. Not because you're emotionally reckless, but because you're emotionally honest. And that kind of honesty takes way more strength than pretending you're above it all. Think about the people who actually move the needle in life, the ones who build deep relationships, who create, who lead, who love fully. They're not the ones trying to be invincible. They're the ones who show up with something real. They care deeply, they take risks, they put their hearts on the line, and sure, they get hurt sometimes, but they also experience more depth, more connection, more truth, because they're not filtering everything through fear. You can live your whole life trying not to get hurt, but in the process, you'll end up missing the things that make life rich. You'll stay safe, but disconnected. You'll avoid heartbreak, but also closeness. And that's the quiet trade-off no one talks about. Because when you're always trying to appear unbothered, you don't give yourself permission to feel what matters. And when you don't let yourself feel, you can't fully live. You're just performing. The truth is, people are drawn to authenticity, not perfection. To warmth, not cold detachment. Someone who can say, I care about this, I want this matters to me, is magnetic. Not because they're dramatic, but because they're real. And in a world where everyone's trying to act like they don't care first, being someone who does is a rare and beautiful thing. Caring doesn't make you weak, it makes you grounded. You don't need to chase anyone, prove anything, or beg for love. But you also don't need to hide how much you feel just to look like you're in control. Real control comes from knowing you'll be okay no matter what, not from pretending you never cared in the first place. When you care without fear, you give yourself permission to show up fully, to have the hard conversations, to take the risks that matter, to experience the kind of love and life that only happen when you're all in. And yes, that opens the door to pain, but it also opens the door to joy. You can have one without being vulnerable to the other. So if you're gonna flex anything, let it be your ability to care boldly, to speak honestly, to love without an exit strategy. That's the energy that changes things. That's what builds something worth keeping. Not the act of indifference, but the presence of truth. Because when it's all said and done, no one looks back and admires how emotionally unavailable they were. They remember the moments they fully showed up, the moments they let themselves feel, the times they chose to care even when it scared them. That's the kind of strength that lasts. So when it comes down to it, acting unbothered might feel like protection, but it's rarely peace. It might win you a moment of pride, but it often costs you clarity, connection, and the kind of growth that only comes when you're willing to be seen. The truth is, caring isn't weakness. Speaking up isn't desperation. Showing emotion isn't losing. It's human, it's powerful, and it's what separates people who merely pass through life from those who actually live it. You don't build love, connection, opportunity, or self-respect by pretending not to care. You build it by showing up, being honest, and letting things matter to you even when there's risk. Especially when there's risk. So stop confusing silence with strength. Stop performing coolness at the cost of your own clarity. The goal isn't to be untouched, it's to be real. Because when you can care deeply and still hold your ground, that's when you're truly unstoppable. And that's when regret has no place to land, because you'll know you didn't hold back. You showed up, fully, and that's always something to be proud of.